Lasmam. Maybe some time alone will teach you when to keep your opinions to yourself. The words sliced through the humid Malaysian air like a machete as my son Marcus slammed the taxi door. His wife Jennifer gunned the engine, and I watched helplessly as they disappeared down the narrow street in Penang, leaving me standing alone with my backpack beside a street vendor selling durian in the sweltering heat of Georgetown. That was the moment I understood my own son had just abandoned me in a foreign country on the other side of the world like I was nothing more than disposable trash. Thank you for watching Granny's narrative. Please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from in the comment. Now let me tell you exactly how a 68-year-old retired school counselor from Seattle ended up stranded in Malaysia with only $47 in my wallet, and the crushing realization that my family had been planning this betrayal for weeks. 4 weeks earlier, Marcus had video called me with what he described as an incredible opportunity. Mom, Jennifer got promoted to regional director for her company in Asia, and they are sending her to Malaysia for 6 months. We thought it would be amazing if you joined us for the first month. You always talked about wanting to travel more after Dad died. I should have been suspicious when he used the word amazing. Marcus had not found anything about me amazing since he graduated from MIT and decided his school counselor mother knew nothing about the real world or success. But I was desperate. It had been 2 years since my husband Richard died from a heart attack, 2 years of rattling around our empty house in Seattle, 2 years of my son barely calling except when he needed something. So when he invited me to Malaysia, I jumped at the chance without thinking twice. When was the last time Marcus had invited me anywhere that did not involve asking me to babysit during his business trips or requesting money for his latest investment scheme? But I ignored every warning sign because I wanted so badly to reconnect with my only child. I researched Malaysia, learned basic Malay phrases, got all my vaccinations, and even bought new luggage for the trip. I imagined us exploring temples together, trying local food, maybe even having real conversations like we used to before his father got sick and everything between us became strained and complicated. The problems started the moment I landed at Penang International Airport. Marcus and Jennifer picked me up in their rental car, and the first thing Jennifer said when she saw me was, "Really, Margaret? You brought that old backpack. We are staying at 5-star hotels and you show up looking like a budget backpacker." Marcus smirked without looking up from his phone. At least she did not wear her gardening clothes like last time we met her at the airport. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood, determined not to let their rudeness destroy what I hoped would be a chance to rebuild our fractured relationship. For 5 days, I followed them around Penang like an unwanted shadow. When they wanted to eat at expensive restaurants overlooking the ocean, I paid without complaint even though the bills were double what I had budgeted. When Jennifer wanted to shop at designer boutiques in Gurney Plaza, I handed over my credit card with a strained smile even though I could see the prices were outrageous. When they booked a luxury spa day and expected me to pay for all 3 of us because everyone deserves pampering, I agreed cheerfully even though it cost more than my monthly utility bills back home. Every night I returned to my hotel room, which of course I was paying for separately because everyone needs their privacy, and I would lie awake wondering when my son had become so cruel and entitled. But every morning I would wake up with renewed hope that today would be different, that today we would connect the way we used to when he was a boy and would tell me all his dreams and fears. Yesterday morning, Marcus announced we were taking a day trip to Georgetown to explore the street art and historic neighborhoods. "You will love it, Mum," he said, using that patronizing tone he had perfected over the years. Very authentic Malaysian experience. Much better than all those tourist traps. The drive had been beautiful at first. Lush tropical landscapes, glimpses of the Andaman Sea, colorful temples appearing around every curve. For a moment, sitting in the back seat of their air-conditioned rental car, I actually felt grateful to be included in their lives. Grateful for this chance to see a part of the world I had only read about in travel magazines. That was before we stopped for lunch at a hawker center and everything fell apart. We were sitting at a plastic table under a tin roof, surrounded by the incredible smells of char kway teow and nasi lemak, when Jennifer started talking about their plans for the next few weeks. "So we have the yacht excursion booked for next Tuesday, then the private island resort for 4 days after that." I had not heard anything about a yacht or a private island. "That sounds wonderful," I said carefully. "I will need to adjust my budget, but I am sure we can make it work." Jennifer and Marcus exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. Actually, Mum, Marcus said, pushing his noodles around his plate without looking at me, we have been meaning to talk to you about something. My heart started racing. About what? About your constant need to be involved in everything we do, Jennifer said bluntly. About how you are always hovering, always offering opinions nobody asked for, always making everything about you. I stared at her, genuinely confused. I do not understand. What did I do? What did you do? Marcus laughed bitterly. Mum, you have done nothing but criticize our choices since you got here. The hotels are too expensive. The restaurants are not authentic enough. We are not budgeting properly. We need to save more for the future. I was only trying to help, I said weakly. We did not ask for your help, Jennifer snapped. We are successful adults with good jobs and our own money. We do not need a retired school counselor telling us how to live our lives. But you asked me to pay for most of this trip, I pointed out, feeling defensive. You said it would be easier if I covered the shared expenses since I was the guest. And you agreed, Marcus said coldly. Nobody forced you. If you could not afford it, you should have said something instead of playing the martyr. The injustice of it took my breath away. I had depleted my savings to pay for this trip, had gone along with every expensive plan they suggested, had swallowed every insult and criticism because I wanted so desperately to spend time with my son. And now I was being accused of playing the martyr. Maybe I made a mistake coming here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe I should just go home early and let you two enjoy the rest of your time alone. That is probably for the best, Jennifer agreed immediately. We can drop you at the airport tomorrow. I'm sure you can change your flight. The casual way she suggested it, like I was nothing more than an inconvenient appointment that could be rescheduled, made something crack inside me. Actually, I said, hearing my voice shake with anger I could no longer contain, I think we need to talk about what is really happening here. Oh, here we go, Marcus rolled his eyes. The big emotional confrontation. Very typical, Mum. You invited me on this trip, I continued, my voice getting stronger. You asked me to come to Malaysia. You made plans that required me to spend thousands of dollars I could barely afford. And now you are acting like I forced myself on you, like I am some kind of burden you never wanted. Because you are a burden, Jennifer said flatly. You have always been a burden. Marcus has been trying to create distance from you for years, but you just will not take the hint. I looked at my son, waiting for him to contradict her, to defend me, to show some shred of the boy who used to tell me I was his favorite person in the world. Instead, he just sat there, staring at his phone, his jaw clenched tight. Marcus, I said quietly. Is that true? Do you really feel that way? Finally, he looked up, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was indifference. Do. You have been suffocating me since Dad died. Always calling, always wanting to visit, always acting like you are the only one who lost someone. Well, guess what? I lost my father too, but I managed to move on with my life instead of wallowing in grief and using it as an excuse to cling to me. The words hit like physical blows. I started, but Marcus cut me off. You have, Mum. You have made your entire life about me because you do not have anything else. No hobbies, no friends, no purpose except bothering your son and his wife. It is exhausting and we are done with it. The other diners at the hawker center had stopped eating to watch our drama unfold. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, could hear the whispers in Malay and Chinese and English. The humiliation was suffocating. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. I am going back to the hotel. We can discuss this more calmly later. No, Jennifer said firmly. We are not going back to the hotel. We have plans this afternoon that do not include you. You can find your own way back. But we are an hour from the hotel, I protested. I do not know this city. I do not speak the language. Then I guess you will figure it out, Marcus said, standing up and pulling money from his wallet. He threw some bills on the table, enough to cover his and Jennifer's meals but not mine. Consider it a life lesson, Mum. Not everything revolves around you. That was when they walked away. Just turned their backs and walked through the crowded hawker center toward their car, leaving me standing alone beside a table covered with half-eaten food and the shocked stares of strangers. I stood there for a full minute, unable to process what had just happened. Then I grabbed my backpack, paid for all 3 meals because I could not bear the shame of walking away from the bill, and stumbled out into the oppressive afternoon heat. The street was a chaos of motorcycles, cars, bicycles, and pedestrians. Colorful shophouses lined both sides, their facades decorated with the famous Georgetown street art I had been so excited to see. Under different circumstances, I would have found it magical. Now it just felt overwhelming and hostile. I pulled out my phone and opened my Maps app, trying to figure out where I was and how to get back to the hotel. But my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone, and when I finally managed to load the directions, I saw it would take nearly 2 hours by public bus with multiple transfers. 2 hours in a city where I did not speak the language, where I did not understand the bus system, where the heat was so intense I was already sweating through my clothes. At 68 years old, with a bad knee and high blood pressure, the prospect was terrifying. That was when I heard a voice speaking English with a British accent. "Excuse me, are you all right? You look rather distressed." I turned to see a woman about my age, maybe slightly younger, with silver gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was carrying shopping bags from what looked like a local market. I started, and then the tears came. Hard, embarrassing, body-shaking sobs that I could not control. "I'm so sorry," I managed to gasp. "I'm fine. I just need to get back to my hotel." The woman set down her shopping bags and pulled a package of tissues from her purse, handing them to me without hesitation. "You are clearly not fine, dear. Where is your hotel? Maybe I can help you get there." Between sobs, I explained what had happened. Not everything, I was too humiliated to share all the details, but enough for her to understand that I had been abandoned by my traveling companions and needed to get back to my accommodation in Batu Ferringhi. Her expression shifted from concern to outrage. "They just left you here, in a strange city, without even making sure you could get back safely. That is absolutely appalling." "They were angry with me," I said, as if that somehow excused their behavior. "I should not have pushed so hard." "No," the woman said firmly. "There is no excuse for abandoning someone, especially a family member, especially in a foreign country. I do not care what the argument was about. What they did was cruel and potentially dangerous." Her righteous anger on my behalf was oddly comforting. "I am Margaret," I said, trying to compose myself. "Margaret Chin." "Vivian Hughes," she replied, shaking my hand. "And I am going to help you get sorted out. First things first, have you had enough water? This heat is brutal and stress dehydration is a real concern." Over the next hour, Vivian took charge of my situation with the efficiency of someone used to solving problems. She bought us both cold drinks from a nearby shop, found a shaded place for us to sit, and helped me figure out the most practical way to get back to my hotel. "The thing is," she said as we studied my phone together, "the buses are quite reliable, but they can be confusing if you do not know the routes. And given how upset you are, I do not think navigating public transport alone is the best idea right now." "I can afford a taxi," I said, though the truth was I was not sure I could. Most of my available cash had gone to paying for lunch, and I did not know how much a taxi ride would cost. "Actually," Vivian said thoughtfully, "I have a better idea. I live about 20 minutes from Batu Ferringhi. Why do not you come to my place, rest for a bit, have some proper tea, and then I will drive you back to your hotel once you have recovered from this ordeal." "I could not possibly impose," I started, but she cut me off. "You are not imposing. I am offering. And frankly, I think you could use a friendly face and a safe place to process what just happened before you have to face your son again." She was right. The thought of going back to that hotel, of being alone in my room replaying the awful scene at the hawker center, was unbearable. At least with Vivian, I would have human company, someone who seemed to genuinely care about my well-being. Vivian's home was a beautiful colonial-era house in a quiet neighborhood, with high ceilings, ceiling fans, and windows that caught every bit of breeze. She settled me in her living room with a tall glass of iced lemon tea and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a plate of homemade key and a box of tissues. "Now," she said, sitting across from me in a rattan chair, "tell me what really happened. Not the sanitized version, the real story." Something about her directness, her obvious compassion, made the whole story pour out. I told her about Richard's death 2 years ago, about how Marcus had become increasingly distant afterward, about the financial struggles I had hidden from everyone, about desperately accepting this trip even though I could not afford it because I was so lonely and desperate to connect with my only child. I told her about Jennifer's constant criticism, about Marcus's coldness, about the growing expenses that had drained my savings. And I told her about the lunch confrontation, about being called a burden and suffocating and accused of wallowing in grief. When I finally finished, drained and empty, Vivian sat back with an expression I could not quite read. "Margaret," she said carefully, "what your son and daughter-in-law did today was emotionally abusive. You understand that, right?" The word abusive felt too strong. He was just angry. Sometimes people say things they do not mean when they are upset. Vivian shook her head. "I spent 30 years as a social worker specializing in elder care. What you are describing is a pattern of financial exploitation and emotional abuse. They invited you on an expensive trip, pressured you to pay for most of it, criticized and belittled you throughout, and then abandoned you in a potentially dangerous situation when you dared to push back. Put that way, it did sound worse than just a family argument." "But he is my son," I said weakly. "Surely he would not deliberately hurt me." "Margaret, dear, being related to someone does not give them a free pass to treat you badly. In fact, it makes it worse because they are betraying a fundamental trust." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "I need to ask you something and I want you to really think about the answer. Has Marcus been accessing your finances at all? Borrowing money, asking you to invest in his ventures, anything like that?" The question hit uncomfortably close to home. "He has borrowed money a few times," I admitted. "For his business ideas. But he always says he will pay me back." "Has he paid you back?" Vivian asked gently. "Not yet, but these things take time. Startups are risky." "How much money are we talking about, Margaret?" I did not want to answer, did not want to face the number out loud. But Vivian waited patiently until I finally whispered about $85,000 over the past 3 years. Her eyes widened. $85,000. "Margaret, that is not borrowing. That is financial exploitation. And combined with this trip that is clearly draining the last of your resources, I would say your son is systematically taking advantage of you." The words hung in the air between us, impossible to unhear. "No," I said, but even I could hear the doubt in my voice. "He would not. He is my son." Vivian reached across and took my hand. "I know this is hard to hear. I know you love him and want to believe the best of him. But sometimes the people we love the most are capable of hurting us the most. And from everything you have told me, Marcus is using your love for him as a weapon against you." We sat in silence for a long time, the ceiling fan rotating lazily overhead, the sounds of the neighborhood drifting through the open windows. I felt like my entire world was being rewritten, like everything I had believed about my relationship with my son was built on foundations of sand. "What do?" I finally asked. "I'm stuck here for 3 more weeks. I do not have enough money to change my flight home. I do not even know if I can afford to stay at my hotel for that long." "First," Vivian said briskly, switching into problem-solving mode, "we figure out your immediate financial situation. How much money do you actually have access to right now?" I pulled out my wallet and counted my remaining cash. $47. I checked my phone banking app. My checking account had $312 and my savings account, which should have had at least $8,000 as my emergency fund, showed a balance of $1,247. My hands started shaking again. "That cannot be right. There should be more than this." "When did you last check your accounts?" Vivian asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Before the trip. About 5 weeks ago. Everything was fine then." With shaking fingers, I opened my transaction history. What I saw made my stomach drop through the floor. There were transfers, dozens of them over the past 6 weeks, moving money from my savings to my checking account, then from my checking account to what appeared to be Marcus's account. Small amounts at first, 200 here, 500 there, then larger ones, 1,000, 2,000, 3,500. "I never authorized these," I whispered, staring at the screen in horror. "I never made these transfers." Vivian looked at the screen over my shoulder. "Do you have a joint account with Marcus? Did you ever give him access to your banking information?" Then I remembered. 6 months ago, Marcus had convinced me to give him my banking login information so he could help me set up online bill pay. He said it would be easier for him to help me manage my finances remotely, that I was not tech-savvy enough to do it safely on my own. I had thought he was being helpful, caring, looking out for his aging mother. He has been stealing from me, I said, and hearing the words out loud made them real in a way they had not been before. My own son has been systematically stealing my money. Yes, Vivian said quietly. Yes. And I suspect that is why he invited you on this trip. Not to spend time with you, but to keep you distracted and away from home while he drained your accounts. He abandoned you before you could discover what he had done. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that I could not process it. This was not a moment of anger or a mistake. This was planned, premeditated theft. Marcus had looked into my eyes and hugged me and called me Mum while simultaneously robbing me blind. I am going to be sick, I said, and Vivian quickly directed me to the bathroom where I lost what little lunch I had managed to eat. When I came back, pale and shaking, she had her laptop open and was typing rapidly. Right, she said without looking up. Here is what we are going to do. First, you are going to call your bank and freeze all your accounts immediately. Then you are going to file a police report for fraud. Then we are going to figure out your living situation because you are absolutely not going back to that hotel. I cannot afford anywhere else, I said hopelessly. And I need to confront Marcus. I need to hear him explain this. Margaret, Vivian said firmly, looking up from her laptop. You are not confronting Marcus right now. You are in shock and you are vulnerable, and he has already proven he is willing to manipulate and exploit you. What you need is time to think clearly and get proper advice before you face him again. But where will I stay? Have no money. Cannot afford to be here. You can stay here, Vivian said simply. I have a guest room that is just sitting empty. You stay here, we sort out your financial situation, and we figure out your next steps from a position of safety and stability. I stared at her. You do not even know me. Why would you do this? Because someone did the same for me once, she said quietly. 20 years ago, when I left my abusive husband with nothing but the clothes on my back, a woman I barely knew gave me a place to stay until I got back on my feet. She told me to pay it forward someday. So that is what I am doing. The kindness of this stranger who owed me nothing was almost harder to bear than my son's betrayal. But I was too exhausted and too broken to argue. Okay, I whispered. Thank you. Over the next 3 hours, Vivian helped me make the necessary phone calls. The bank was horrified when I explained what had happened and immediately froze all my accounts and initiated a fraud investigation. They confirmed that the transfers had been made using my login credentials but from an IP address in Malaysia, which meant Marcus had likely been accessing my accounts from his phone or laptop during the trip. The police report was more complicated. The fraud had been committed by an American citizen against another American citizen, but the transactions had originated in Malaysia. It would require cooperation between multiple law enforcement agencies and could take months to resolve. Do you want to press charges? The police officer asked me over the phone. Even though he is your son. I looked at Vivian, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I want to press charges. That evening, sitting in Vivian's comfortable guest room with its view of a small tropical garden, I finally allowed myself to cry properly. Not the shocked tears of the afternoon, but deep grieving sobs for the son I thought I had, for the relationship I had believed in, for the future I had imagined. My phone buzzed with messages. First from Jennifer. Where are you? We are back at the hotel and you are not here. Then from Marcus. Mum, stop being dramatic. Come back to the hotel so we can talk like adults. I did not respond. Instead, I turned off my phone and lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a Malaysian night, and wondered how I would ever rebuild a life from these ruins. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and fresh bread. Vivian was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with the efficient movements of someone who had lived alone for a long time. Sleep well, she asked as I shuffled in, still wearing the clothes from yesterday because I had no others with me. Not really, I admitted. I kept having nightmares about bank statements and abandoned hawker centers. Vivian smiled sympathetically. That is normal. Trauma does strange things to our sleep. She poured me a cup of coffee and set a plate of toast and fruit in front of me. At first, then we will make a plan for today. As we ate, Vivian outlined what she thought I should do. First, we need to get your belongings from the hotel. I suspect Marcus and Jennifer have already gone through your things, possibly looking for credit cards or anything else of value. Second, we need to contact the American Embassy to explain your situation. They may be able to help with emergency funds or assistance getting you home. Third, we need to find you a lawyer who specializes in elder financial abuse. It all sounded overwhelming. I appreciate everything you are doing, I said carefully. But I cannot afford a lawyer. I can barely afford to eat right now. There are legal aid services for situations like this, Vivian assured me. And I have some contacts who might be willing to help pro bono. Let me make some calls. While Vivian worked the phone with impressive efficiency, I sat in her garden and tried to process everything that had happened. Less than 24 hours ago, I had been a naive mother desperately hoping to reconnect with her son. Now I was essentially homeless in a foreign country, financially devastated, and facing the reality that my only child was a thief and an abuser. My phone, which I had finally turned back on, showed 23 missed calls from Marcus and 15 text messages ranging from concerned to angry to threatening. The last one, sent at 3 a.m., read simply, "If you have gone to the police you will regret it." I showed the message to Vivian when she came back outside. She photographed it immediately. That is evidence of intimidation, possibly witness tampering. Forward that to the police right away. Retrieving my belongings from the hotel turned out to be its own drama. Vivian drove me there mid-morning, and we discovered that Marcus and Jennifer had checked out early, taking both their luggage and, as I had feared, several of my belongings including my laptop, my good camera, and the emergency credit card I had hidden in my suitcase. The hotel staff was sympathetic but unhelpful. "Your son said you had given him permission to take those items," the desk clerk explained. "He paid your outstanding balance and checked you out as well." "But those were my belongings," I protested. "He had no right." "I am very sorry, madam. But we cannot get involved in family disputes. Perhaps you should contact the police." So Marcus had stolen my remaining possessions and checked me out of the hotel, leaving me with literally nothing but the backpack I had been carrying when he abandoned me. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. On the drive back to her house, Vivian was quiet, and I could see she was thinking hard about something. Finally she spoke. "Margaret, I have an idea, but you need to hear me out completely before you respond." "Okay," I said cautiously. "I run a small non-profit organization that helps elderly expats and tourists who find themselves in difficult situations here in Malaysia. We do not have much funding, mostly just donations and volunteer work, but we have connections and resources. One of the things we have been trying to establish is a safe house specifically for people in situations like yours." "That sounds wonderful," I said, not sure where she was going with this. "The thing is," Vivian continued, "we have the house. A small place in Butterworth that was donated to the organization last year. But we do not have anyone to manage it, to handle intake, to coordinate services for the residents. We have been looking for someone with counseling or social work experience, someone who understands the emotional aspects of helping people in crisis." "You want me to work for you," I said slowly. "But Vivian, I am one of the people in crisis. I am 68 years old with no money and no prospects. Cannot even help myself right now." "Which is exactly why you would be perfect for this job," Vivian said firmly. "You understand what it feels like to be vulnerable and exploited. You have empathy that comes from lived experience. And you have 40 years of professional counseling experience that would be invaluable." "But I would need somewhere to live," I pointed out. "Cannot afford rent." "The house has a small apartment attached for the resident manager," Vivian said. "It is not much, just a bedroom, bathroom and kitchenette, but it is yours rent-free if you take the position. Plus a modest salary. Not much but enough to live on while you figure out your next steps." I stared at her. "Are you seriously offering me a job and a place to live?" "I am seriously offering you a chance to rebuild your life while helping others who have been through similar trauma. You would be earning your keep, not accepting charity. There is a difference." The offer was so unexpected, so generous, that I did not know how to respond. "But what about my visa?" I finally asked. I am only allowed to be here as a tourist for 90 days. We can sponsor you for a work visa through the non-profit, Vivian said. Take some time and paperwork, but it is definitely doable. The question is, do you want to do this? Do you want to stay in Malaysia and build something new? Or do you want to go back to Seattle and try to pick up the pieces of your old life? It was a fair question. What was waiting for me in Seattle? An empty house filled with memories of Richard. A son who had stolen from me and would probably face criminal charges. A community where everyone would soon know the humiliation of what had happened. A life that had felt hollow and purposeless even before this disaster. Here in Malaysia I could start fresh. I could use my pain to help others. I could build a life on my own terms without the burden of family obligations and expectations. It was terrifying and exciting in equal measure. I want to stay, I heard myself say. I want to take the job. Vivian smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I had seen on her face. Then we have a lot of work to do. But first I think we need to go shopping. You need more than one set of clothes. The safe house in Butterworth was a narrow 3-story building wedged between a coffee shop and a fabric store on a busy street near the ferry terminal. The ground floor was set up as a common area with a kitchen, sitting room, and small office. The second floor had 3 bedrooms for residents. The third floor was the manager apartment Vivian had mentioned. It was small and sparse, but it had large windows that caught the morning light, a ceiling fan that actually worked, and a tiny balcony overlooking the street where I could watch the daily theater of Malaysian life unfold below. After months of living in hotel rooms and before that an empty house in Seattle, it felt like a sanctuary. Over the next 6 weeks, I threw myself into setting up the safe house with an energy I had not felt in years. Vivian connected me with her network of volunteers and donors, people who provided furniture, linens, kitchen supplies, and everything else we needed to make the space functional and welcoming. I developed intake procedures, emergency protocols, and partnerships with local social services. I trained volunteers on trauma-informed care and cultural sensitivity. I created resource guides for different types of crises. And slowly, carefully, I began to feel useful again, necessary again, valued again. Our first resident was a 73-year-old British woman named Edith, whose grandson had brought her to Malaysia and then disappeared with her pension money. Our second was a Malaysian widow whose adult children had forced her out of her home. Our third was an Australian man whose daughter had abandoned him after a medical emergency left him unable to travel alone. Each of their stories broke my heart. Each of their recoveries gave me hope. I was not just helping them. I was healing myself through the process of helping them heal. Marcus tried to contact me multiple times during those first months. The messages went from angry to pleading to threatening and back again. When the police investigation started generating real consequences, when he learned he might face actual criminal charges, his messages became desperate. "Mom, please," one text read. "This is all a misunderstanding. Jennifer pressured me into it. I never wanted to hurt you. Can we please just talk?" I did not respond. Instead, I forwarded every message to my lawyer and to the police and continued building my new life. The lawyer Vivian had connected me with, a sharp woman named Devi who specialized in elder law, was optimistic about recovering at least some of my money. "International fraud cases are complicated," she explained. "But we have excellent documentation and the bank is cooperating fully. More importantly, Marcus is scared. Scared people make mistakes and mistakes give us leverage." She was right. 4 months after I had been abandoned in Georgetown, Marcus' lawyer contacted Devi with a settlement offer. Marcus would return $60,000 of the money he had stolen, admit to fraud in a civil proceeding, and agree to a restraining order prohibiting him from contacting me. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue criminal charges. It was not everything I had lost. It did not undo the emotional betrayal. But it was enough to rebuild my financial security, and it meant I would not have to see my son in court, would not have to relive the trauma publicly. Should I take it, I asked Devi. Or should I push for criminal prosecution? She considered carefully. That depends on what you want, Margaret. Do you want punishment or do you want closure? Do you want justice or do you want to move forward with your life? I thought about the woman I had been when I arrived in Malaysia. Desperate, lonely, clinging to a relationship that had been toxic for years. Then I thought about the woman I was becoming. Strong, purposeful, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. I want closure, I said. I want the money back and I want him out of my life permanently. But I do not want to spend the next year of my life in legal battles. I want to focus on the future, not the past. Devi smiled. Then we will accept the settlement. The money arrived in my newly secured bank account on a rainy Tuesday in November. I sat in my little apartment above the safe house and watched the balance change from $1,247 to $61,247 and felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Freedom. I was not rich. I was not young. I was not living the life I had planned. But I was free from manipulation, free from exploitation, free from the exhausting work of loving someone who did not love me back. That evening, I treated Vivian to dinner at a nice restaurant overlooking the ocean. This is to celebrate, I told her. The settlement came through. I am officially no longer destitute. Vivian raised her glass of wine. To new beginnings and to the strength you have shown through an impossible situation. We clinked glasses and I took a sip, savoring the moment. You saved my life, I said quietly. I do not know where I would be right now if you had not found me that day. Vivian shook her head. You saved yourself, Margaret. I just gave you a safe place to land while you figured out your next steps. Everything else, the strength, the courage, the decision to build something new instead of retreating into victimhood, that was all you. I wanted to believe her. Some days I did believe her. Other days I woke up feeling like an imposter, like a broken woman pretending to be whole, like someone who had no business counseling others when I had been so thoroughly fooled by my own son. But the residents at the safe house did not see me that way. Edith, who had been with us for 3 months now, told me I was the first person who truly understood what she was going through. The Australian man, whose name was Frank, said my counseling sessions had given him tools to process his trauma that years of therapy back home had never provided. And slowly, through helping them heal, I was healing too. 6 months after being abandoned in Georgetown, I was invited to speak at a regional conference on elder abuse in Kuala Lumpur. The organizers had heard about the safe house and wanted me to share my experience, both as a victim and as someone now working to help other victims. The thought of standing in front of hundreds of people and telling my story terrified me. But Vivian convinced me it was important. Your story has power, she said. It can help people understand that elder abuse does not just happen to weak or stupid people. It can happen to educated, intelligent, capable individuals who simply trusted the wrong person. So I stood on that stage in a conference center in Kuala Lumpur and told my story. I told them about being abandoned. I told them about the financial theft. I told them about the shame and humiliation and the crushing realization that my son had never loved me the way I loved him. But I also told them about Vivian's kindness, about the safe house, about rediscovering my purpose and my strength, about learning that being victimized does not mean you have to remain a victim. The response was overwhelming. People approached me afterward with their own stories, with tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving voice to experiences they thought were too shameful to share. Several organizations asked if I would be willing to consult with them on developing similar programs. A publisher contacted me about writing a book about elder financial abuse from the perspective of both victim and counselor. My life, which had felt so small and purposeless 2 years ago, was suddenly expanding in directions I never could have imagined. But the real transformation came 8 months after my abandonment, when we received a new resident at the safe house who forced me to confront my deepest wounds. Her name was Patricia and she was 71 years old. Her daughter and son-in-law had brought her to Malaysia under the pretense of a family vacation, then had stolen her passport, her credit cards and her phone, leaving her stranded in a budget hotel with no way to contact anyone or get home to Canada. The parallels to my own story were so exact they made my chest hurt. As I sat across from Patricia during her intake interview, listening to her describe her daughter's betrayal with the same confusion and heartbreak I had felt, I saw myself as I had been 8 months ago. Broken, humiliated, unable to understand how a child she had raised could be capable of such cruelty. Why, Patricia kept asking, her voice breaking. Why would she do this to me? I gave her everything. I sacrificed everything for her. How could she just throw me away like I am nothing? I had asked myself the same questions 1,000 times. And I still did not have a good answer. But I had learned something important in the months since my own abandonment. Something I needed Patricia to understand. Because she is broken in ways that have nothing to do with you, I said gently. Because some people are so consumed by their own needs and wants that they cannot see the humanity in others, even in their own parents. Because the world is full of people who will exploit kindness and mistake love for weakness. But that is not about who you are, Patricia. That is about who she is. You did not fail as a mother. She failed as a human being. Patricia stared at me with red-rimmed eyes. How do you know that? How can you be so sure? Because my son did the same thing to me, I said. And I have spent the last 8 months learning to separate his choices from my worth. They are not the same thing. What he did to me does not define me. What your daughter did to you does not define you. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Patricia asked the question I had been dreading. Does it stop hurting? Eventually, does it stop feeling like someone ripped your heart out? I considered lying, considered telling her that time heals all wounds and one day she would wake up and the pain would be gone. But she deserved honesty. It gets different, I said finally. Some days it barely hurts at all. Other days something will remind you and it feels fresh all over again. But what changes is that the pain stops being the center of your life. It becomes part of your story, not the whole story. What is the rest of your story? Patricia asked. After the pain, what comes next? For me, I said, gesturing around the safe house, it was this. Finding purpose in helping others who have been through similar trauma. Building a community of people who understand. Creating something meaningful from something terrible. But it does not have to be the same for you. Some people go home and rebuild their old lives. Some people stay and build new ones. Some people reconcile with their families and some people cut ties permanently. There is no right answer, Patricia. There is only what works for you. Over the next few weeks, I watched Patricia go through the same stages I had experienced. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and slowly, tentatively, acceptance. I was there for every stage, sharing my own experience when it was helpful, staying silent when she needed to process things on her own. And through helping her, I realized something profound. I had not just survived my son's betrayal. I had transformed it into something that could help others survive theirs. Marcus had tried to destroy me. Had tried to leave me broken and helpless in a foreign land. Instead, he had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of my life. He had set me free to become who I was always meant to be. 1 year after being abandoned in Georgetown, Vivian organized a celebration at the safe house. We had helped 23 people in that first year. Some had gone home. Some had stayed in Malaysia. All of them had found their way forward from crisis to stability. The small common room was packed with current residents, former residents, volunteers, and supporters. Someone had made a cake. Someone else had brought champagne. People were laughing and telling stories and celebrating not just the anniversary of the safe house but the collective triumph of survival over adversity. In the middle of the celebration, my phone rang. An unknown number with a U.S. country code. I almost did not answer, but something made me step outside onto the narrow street and take the call. "Hello," I said cautiously. It was Marcus, and his voice sounded strange, thin and uncertain. "Please do not hang up. I just need 1 minute." I should have hung up immediately. I had a restraining order. He was not supposed to contact me. But curiosity kept me on the line. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I wanted you to know that Jennifer left me. She filed for divorce and moved back to the States. Apparently, she had been cheating on me for months. She took half of everything and left me with nothing." I waited, saying nothing. "And I have been thinking about what I did to you. About how I treated you. About the money I stole and the way I abandoned you. And I realize now that I was wrong. I was cruel and selfish and I destroyed the one person who actually loved me unconditionally. I am calling to say I am sorry, Mum. I know it does not fix anything. I know you probably hate me. But I needed you to know that I am sorry and that I wish I could go back and make different choices." The apology I had wanted so desperately a year ago now felt hollow and meaningless. Do you need money? I asked bluntly. Is that why you are really calling? Because you are broke and alone and hoping I will rescue you one more time? No, he said quickly. Then, more honestly maybe. I do not know. I'm a mess, Mum. My life is falling apart and I do not know how to fix it. The old Margaret would have immediately offered help, would have sent money, would have made excuses for his behavior and welcomed him back into her life with open arms. The new Margaret knew better. Marcus, I said carefully. I appreciate the apology. You do. And I believe you are genuinely sorry. But being sorry does not undo the damage. It does not rebuild the trust. It does not change the fact that you stole from me, abandoned me, and tried to destroy my life to benefit yourself. I know, he whispered. No. So here is what I am going to tell you. Forgive you. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I forgive you so I can let go of the anger and resentment and move forward with my life. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. It does not mean I am inviting you back into my life. It does not mean we are going to have a relationship again. You are going to have to figure out your life on your own, Marcus. The same way I had to figure out mine when you left me stranded in Malaysia. And maybe, if you actually do the work to become a better person, if you genuinely change and grow and learn from your mistakes, maybe someday we can have a conversation about rebuilding trust. But that day is not today. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice thick with tears. Understand. And Mum, for what it is worth, I am proud of you. I saw the article about your work with the safe house. You are helping so many people. You are doing something that really matters. The compliment felt genuine, but it also felt beside the point. Thank you, I said. And Marcus, I hope you find your way. Really do. I hope you become the man I always believed you could be. But I cannot be part of that journey. You have to walk that path alone. I hung up before he could respond, before I could second-guess myself, before the old instinct to rescue and fix and enable could reassert itself. When I went back inside, Vivian took one look at my face and pulled me aside. Everything okay? She asked. That was Marcus, I said. He apologized. He said he was sorry for everything. And how do you feel? I considered the question carefully. I feel sad for him. I feel glad that I can forgive him without needing him in my life. And I feel grateful that I am here in this place with these people doing this work. His apology does not change my life anymore, Vivian. My life is already changed. Changed it myself. Vivian smiled and squeezed my hand. That is growth, Margaret. That is real, genuine healing. The party continued late into the evening. At one point, Patricia, who had been with us for 3 months and was preparing to return to Canada with a solid plan for her future, stood up and clinked her glass for attention. I want to make a toast, she announced. To Margaret, who showed me that being abandoned by someone you love does not mean you are unlovable. To Vivian, who created this space where broken people can become whole again. And to all of us, everyone in this room, who survived something that was supposed to destroy us and came out stronger on the other side. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered, and I felt tears running down my face. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude and joy and pride in what we had all accomplished together. 2 years after being abandoned in Georgetown, the safe house had expanded to include a second location and a partnership with 3 other Southeast Asian countries to develop similar programs. I was traveling regularly to train other counselors, speaking at conferences, and consulting with governments on elder abuse prevention policies. My book, which I had titled Abandoned But Not Broken, had been published and was being used in social work programs across the world. The royalties were modest but steady, adding to the financial security I had rebuilt through careful saving and smart investments. I had friends, real friends who valued me for who I was. I had meaningful work that gave my life purpose. I had a community of people who had become like family, bound together by shared experience and mutual support. And I had something else I never expected. His name was James, and he was a 70-year-old retired doctor from Australia who had been volunteering at the safe house for 6 months. He was kind and funny and patient, with silver hair and laugh lines around his eyes and a gentle way of listening that made people feel heard. We had been spending more and more time together. Coffee before our volunteer shifts. Dinner after particularly difficult days. Long walks along the waterfront discussing everything from philosophy to favorite books to our respective experiences with loss and renewal. Last week, he had asked me to have dinner with him. Not as colleagues or friends but as a real date. And I had said yes. The restaurant he chose was simple but elegant, with outdoor seating overlooking the water. We talked for hours about our lives, our children, our regrets and hopes and dreams for whatever time we had left. "Can I ask you something?" James said as we were finishing dessert. "Do you ever regret staying in Malaysia? Do you ever wish you had gone back to Seattle and tried to rebuild your old life?" I considered the question carefully. Sometimes I miss certain things. American grocery stores. Familiar seasons. Being able to understand every conversation I overhear. But regret staying, no. Never. "What changed?" he asked. "Between being the woman who was abandoned and the woman you are now, what was the moment you knew you were going to be okay?" "I think it was when I stopped waiting for Marcus to validate my worth," I said slowly. "When I stopped needing his love or approval to feel like I mattered. When I realized that my value as a human being was not determined by whether my son appreciated me or not." "That is profound," James said quietly. "It is also terrifying," I admitted. "Because it means accepting that some relationships are not salvageable. That sometimes love is not enough. That you can do everything right and still end up alone." "But you are not alone," he pointed out gently. "You are surrounded by people who care about you." "You are right," I said, smiling at him. "I am not alone at all." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Margaret, I do not know what the future holds. I do not know how much time either of us has left or what challenges we might face. But I know that I feel more alive when I am with you than I have felt in years. And I wonder if you might feel the same way." I looked at this kind man who was offering me not a rescue or a solution but a partnership, a companionship, a chance at building something new together. And I realized that Marcus's abandonment had not just freed me from a toxic relationship. It had freed me to be open to healthy ones. "I do feel the same way," I said. "And that terrifies me almost as much as it excites me." James laughed. "But if we are both terrified, we will be sure to handle each other with care." 3 years after being abandoned in Georgetown, I stood on a beach in Langkawi at sunset, surrounded by friends and colleagues and residents past and present. James stood beside me, holding my hand, as Vivian performed a simple ceremony marking our commitment to each other. We had decided not to get married officially. Both of us had been married before and did not feel the need for legal paperwork, but we wanted to celebrate our partnership and our future together. Patricia was there, having flown in from Canada specifically for the occasion. Edith was there with her new partner, a widower she had met through a support group back in England. Frank was there with his daughter, who had flown in from Australia to repair their relationship. As the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Vivian spoke about transformation and resilience and the unexpected ways that life can surprise us when we are brave enough to let go of what we thought we wanted and embrace what we actually need. Margaret came to Malaysia broken and afraid, Vivian said. She had every reason to give up, to see herself as a victim, to spend the rest of her life bitter and angry about what was done to her. Instead, she chose to transform her pain into purpose. She chose to build rather than destroy. She chose love over hate, hope over despair, action over passivity. And in doing so, she not only healed herself, she created a space where dozens of others could heal too. She proved that it is never too late to start over, never too late to become who you were meant to be, never too late to choose joy. Everyone applauded and I felt James squeeze my hand. "You okay?" he whispered. "I am better than okay," I whispered back. "I'm happy." And I was. Not the naive happiness of someone who has never experienced pain, but the deep, hard-won happiness of someone who has walked through fire and emerged transformed. Marcus had tried to abandon me. Instead, he had given me permission to abandon the small, constrained life I had been living and step into something infinitely larger. That night, as James and I walked along the beach under a blanket of stars, I thought about the woman I had been 3 years ago. The woman who had measured her worth by her son's approval. The woman who had been so desperate for connection that she could not see how toxic that connection had become. I thought about standing alone on that street in Georgetown, terrified and abandoned, thinking my life was over. And I thought about how wrong I had been. My life had not ended that day. It had begun. "Do you ever hear from Marcus?" James asked, as if reading my thoughts. "No," I said. "The restraining order is still in effect. Sometimes I wonder how he is doing, if he ever got his life together, if he ever became the person he was capable of being. But then I remember that wondering about him keeps me connected to him in a way that is not healthy for me." "That sounds wise," James said. "It is a work in progress," I admitted. "Some days I still struggle with guilt, with wondering if I could have done something differently, if I somehow failed as a mother." "You did not fail," James said firmly. "You gave him every opportunity. He chose to waste them. That is on him, not you." "I know," I said. "And most days I believe that. But the programming runs deep, you know. The belief that mothers are supposed to sacrifice everything for their children, that we are supposed to fix their problems and excuse their behavior and love them no matter what they do to us. There is a difference between unconditional love and unconditional access," James pointed out. "You can still love your son while maintaining boundaries that protect your well-being." He was right, of course. And I did still love Marcus. Or at least I loved the memory of who he had been before greed and entitlement had twisted him into someone I did not recognize. But that love no longer controlled my life or defined my happiness. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the waves and feeling the warm breeze against our skin. Then James spoke again. "Can I tell you what I admire most about you?" "I am afraid to ask," I said with a laugh. "Your courage," he said seriously. "Not the courage to start over, though that is impressive. But the courage to let go. To release your grip on a relationship that was destroying you. To accept that sometimes love is not enough. That takes a strength most people never develop." "I did not feel strong," I said. "I felt broken and desperate and terrified." "That is when real courage shows up," James replied. "When you are broken and desperate and terrified, and you keep moving forward anyway." Maybe he was right. Maybe courage was not about feeling fearless. Maybe it was about feeling all the fear and uncertainty and pain, and choosing to build something new anyway. 4 years after being abandoned in Georgetown, I received a letter. It came to the safe house, addressed in handwriting I recognized immediately even though I had not seen it in years. "Marcus." I stared at the envelope for a long time, my heart racing. The restraining order had expired 6 months ago. He was legally allowed to contact me now. But that did not mean I was obligated to read what he had written. I called Vivian. "I got a letter from Marcus. Should I open it?" "Do you want to?" she asked. "I do not know. Part of me is curious. Part of me is terrified. Part of me thinks I should just burn it and move on." "All valid responses," Vivian said. "But Margaret, you have done so much work to heal from what he did. You have built a life that does not revolve around him or his choices. Opening that letter or not opening it, either way you're going to be okay." She was right. Whether I read his words or not, my life was solid now. I had James. I had meaningful work. I had community and purpose and joy. Nothing Marcus could write would change that. I decided to open the letter. It was 5 pages long, handwritten in the careful script Marcus had learned as a child. He wrote about the past 4 years, about losing everything, about hitting rock bottom, about finally going to therapy and facing the ugliness of his own behavior. He wrote about making amends to other people he had hurt, about slowly rebuilding his life with honesty instead of manipulation, about learning to support himself without exploiting others. And he wrote about me, about his regrets, about the shame he carried for what he had done. About understanding now that his cruelty had not been about me at all, but about his own brokenness. His own inability to accept love without trying to monetize it. "I am not writing to ask for forgiveness," the letter concluded. "I am not writing to ask for a relationship or a second chance. I am writing because my therapist says that making amends requires acknowledging the harm I caused, even if that acknowledgement is never accepted. So this is my acknowledgement. I hurt you terribly. I exploited your love and your generosity. I abandoned you in a foreign country and tried to destroy you financially. And there is no excuse for any of it. You deserved a son who honored your sacrifices and celebrated your strength. Instead you got me. And I am genuinely sorry for that. I hope you have built a good life, Mum. I hope you have found peace and happiness. And I hope that someday, when I have done enough work to become someone worthy of your time, you might be willing to have a conversation. Not to rebuild what we had because that is gone forever, but maybe to build something new and healthier from the ruins. But if that day never comes, I understand. You owe me nothing. Your son Marcus. I read the letter 3 times, letting the words sink in. Felt genuine. Felt like real growth and self-awareness. It felt like the beginning of the kind of change that takes years of consistent effort to sustain. But I also knew that good intentions and heartfelt apologies were not the same as changed behavior. And I knew that even if Marcus had genuinely transformed himself, that did not obligate me to give him access to my life again. I showed the letter to James. "What do you think?" I asked. He read it carefully, then looked up at me. "I think it sounds like he has done some real work on himself. I think the apology seems genuine. And I think the question is not whether he deserves a response, but whether you want to give him one." "Do you think I should?" I asked. James shook his head. "That is not my decision to make, Margaret. I will support whatever you choose. But I will say this. You do not owe him anything. Not a response, not forgiveness, not a relationship. Whatever you decide, make sure it is because you want to, not because you feel obligated." I sat with that letter for 2 weeks, thinking about what I wanted. Not what Marcus needed. Not what a good mother should do. Not what would make me look generous or forgiving or evolved. But what I actually wanted for myself and my life. In the end, I wrote back. A short letter, 3 paragraphs. I acknowledged his apology. I told him I appreciated the work he had done on himself. And I told him that I was not ready for any kind of relationship, but that I wished him well in his continued growth. It was honest. It was kind. It was boundaried. And it felt right. When I mailed the letter, I felt a sense of completion. Not closure exactly, because relationships do not always have neat endings. But a sense that I had handled the situation in a way that honored both my healing and his efforts to change. 5 years after being abandoned in Georgetown, I celebrated my 73rd birthday surrounded by people I loved. The safe house was thriving. James and I were planning a trip to New Zealand. My book was being translated into 6 languages. And I was happier than I had ever been in my entire life. At some point during the celebration, Patricia pulled me aside. "You know what I realized," she said. "What happened to us, the abandonment and the betrayal, it was the worst thing and the best thing at the same time." I knew exactly what she meant. It was the worst thing because of the pain and the trauma and the shattering of something we thought was unbreakable. But it was the best thing because it forced us to become people we never would have been otherwise. If Marcus had not abandoned me, I would probably still be in Seattle, lonely and purposeless, measuring my worth by my son's occasional phone calls and visits. I would have continued to enable his bad behavior, to drain my resources supporting his failures, to accept crumbs of affection and call it love. Instead, I was here, alive and engaged and building something meaningful, making a real difference in the world. Loved and valued not for what I could provide but for who I was. Marcus had meant to destroy me when he left me on that street in Georgetown. Instead, he had given me the greatest gift of my life. He had set me free to discover who I could be when I stopped trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. As I looked around the room at all the people who had become my true family, I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it took my breath away. Not gratitude for what Marcus had done, but gratitude for what I had done with it. For choosing to transform pain into purpose. For refusing to let betrayal define me. For having the courage to build a new life from the ruins of the old one. The night before I was abandoned, I had been a 68-year-old woman who thought her value came from being needed by her child. 5 years later, I was a 73-year-old woman who knew her value came from being herself. That was the real transformation. Not the safe house or the book or the new relationship or the work I was doing. Those were just the external manifestations of an internal shift. The real change was learning that I was enough, just as I was, with or without my son's approval. And that knowledge, hard-won through pain and struggle and countless moments of doubt, was worth more than any relationship I had lost. So thank you, Marcus. Thank you for abandoning me in Malaysia. Thank you for showing me who you really were. Thank you for forcing me to choose between clinging to a toxic relationship and embracing the unknown. Because that choice, as terrifying as it was, led me to this moment, this life, this version of myself that I never knew I could be. And I would not trade it for anything in the world. If you are watching this and you have been abandoned or betrayed by someone you love, I want you to know something. You are not alone. You are not worthless. And this is not the end of your story. It is just the beginning of something better. Thanks for listening. Do not forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters and your journey matters, and you matter more than you know.